Good morning, everybody. Nice to meet you all. A little bit of introduction for me. I'm Joy Bogalia. I recently graduated from NYU, and I've been working with STEM since this February. So today we'll be making a simple full stack application using AWS services. We'll be using AWS Lambda, API Gateway, and we'll be connecting that with the OpenAI's API. And then we'll be deploying our application on an S3 bucket. So AWS is one of the most popular cloud platforms, as you know, along with Azure and Google Cloud. Azure has been catching up quite a lot recently because of OpenAI's the funding that they have provided to OpenAI. So a couple of things that you'll need to get started with this is an AWS account. So AWS does provide a free tier, which is quite generous for basically Lambda functions. You have for Lambda functions, you get about 1 million requests a month and about 400,000 compute seconds per month. The OpenAI API does not provide any free tier, but you do get a $5 credit for around 3 months. That can be used for testing and all that stuff. Unless you have a live application running on production, you probably will not exhaust those $5. So here's the pricing for OpenAI. We have several models that can be used. The model we'll be using today is the GPT 3.5 Turbo that provides around, pricing is quite fair, $0.002 per 1.5 tokens. And once you sign up for the first time, you do get around 5 credits for first time usage. So once you sign up on your AWS account, you will be presented with this console. So you have a lot of services that AWS provides. So get started with this. We're first gonna create a Lambda function for us, which is gonna act as like a backend server for our application. So just let's go to Lambda. Over here, you can go to create function, author from scratch, just provide a name for the function. You can choose any runtime. I personally prefer Python, but that's up to you. And that is it. Create function. So I already have a function created. It's called project sample. So over here, you can view the code for the backend. So every Lambda function has something called a Lambda handler, which acts as a default entry point to the application. So whenever the Lambda function is invoked, this function is going to be called. The event parameter contains data that is generally sent through an API or any other function, and contains the body. And through the body, you can extract the data. Context generally contains some runtime information that we won't be needing that here. So I'm just calling the GPT API through here. So OpenAI does provide very extensive documentation for implementing the APIs, and this part is actually directly retrieved from there. So you have several parameters that you can adjust. You have your model, you have your maximum tokens. So whenever you receive a response from the server, it has something called tokens. So they do provide some context on what it is. So for every 1,000 tokens, it basically computes around 750 words. And for pricing, the total tokens actually depends on the input token as well as the output token. So you have to be careful on how lengthy your actual input is. So then we have a temperature. Temperature basically controls how deterministic the output is going to be. if the temperature is closer than 0, the output is going to be more deterministic. But if it is closer to 1, it is going to be more random. Over here, I'm just making a basic response and then returning, well, returning 200 at the, call is successful, otherwise 500. So once I'm done with this, we can just go ahead and test it. Let's create a new test event. My test. So you can see it runs successfully. We did receive a response from the server. Hello from Lambda. So one thing that you actually need to make sure is, even in Python, we have to install several modules. So just like we do it locally through pip, that can also be done on AWS. So for this function, actually, we are importing something called requests. So by default, the Lambda functions do not provide this modules. You will have to actually package a module ourselves and then insert it into Lambda using layers. So there are two common ways to do it. You can either do it locally, then package the layer and upload it, or there's one other method that I personally like to use, and it is through something called Cloud Shell. So through Cloud Shell, we can basically package our own dependencies that we need for a Lambda function, and then upload it to an S3 bucket. S3 stands for Simple Storage Service, and it is easy to use, quite cheap, and you can basically store any kind of data and any amount of data that you want on it. So once we are logged in, we can just create a directory. Then once we are inside that, we can create another directory. Let's call it Python. Once we're inside that, we're going to create a virtual environment, which is going to allow us to install any dependencies that we need. So we can do Python 3. Okay. And we're going to activate this VNV. Now we're going to install a dependency which was request. So we can just do pip install requests. Okay, that's going to install it. Now all we have to do is package it. We can give it a name called, let's say, my package. Now we can directly upload it through an S3 bucket. For that, the command is AWS S3 copy my package.zip and then our S3 URL. Lambda layers 2. And we are done. We can see our package was uploaded. Now, all we have to do is go back to Lambda, layers, create a layer, give it a name, upload from S3. We can just go over here, copy this URL, paste, and that will create a layer. So I already have a layer created, which is called Lambda request. So I'll just attach it to the function over here, project samples, layers, add a layer, custom layers, Lambda requests, version 1, and we're done. So we just created our Lambda function. The next step is to actually set up the API gateway. That can be done through just search API gateway over here. Create API, select REST API, and just give it any name. Let's call it first API. And you can either choose regional or edge optimized. Regional basically is more suitable if a large number of requests are coming from only one region, let's say US East 1. But if you have an application that has been deployed worldwide, so for that, edge optimize is going to be a more suitable option. For most applications, edge optimize is the better option. So over here, since we'll be sending our data through a post request, we'll be creating some resources for it. Let's first create a resource. Let's call it send data. Create resource. Select that. Create a method. Create a post method. So for this, since we invoking our Lambda function directly, the integration type is going to be Lambda function. And you need to check this called use Lambda proxy integration. What's that going to do is send the entire body directly to the event parameter of a Lambda function, as you just saw over here. So you can just extract the entire request through the event parameter. Over here, you just have to select your Lambda function, for example, and we are done. You can now go ahead and test your API. So we did receive a response from the OpenAI API, so that's good. Now the next step is to deploy our application. So that can be done directly through here, deploy API. But before we do that, we need to enable CORS. So CORS stands for Cross Origin Resource Sharing. So what it does is basically allows your application to be accessed by an external domain. So over here, while testing the API, that is done entirely through AWS, so that works. But if you try to do it through an external application, that'll give you a CORS error. So go ahead and enable CORS. And next step is to deploy the API. Let's just give it a version. Let's say V1. Deploy. And this is our API URL. The actual URL is going to be version 1/send data. That was our resource. So once we are done with that, the next step actually is to create a front end for our application. So you are free to use any front-end framework you want. I personally used React for this. And so you can open up any terminal, go to create a directory, and basically use npx create React app and give it a name. So that's going to basically create a directory, a complete React directory. So you can just modify the files as you wish. So this is our default reactor use states, and I have several state variables: query, response, error, and is loading. And this is these are my functions that that update the state for my React application. So I'm just creating a simple HTTP. I'm just creating a simple post request to my API. Over here, I get set my response, and I catch any errors if I get them. And this is my basic placeholder for the front end, input label, button to submit it, and any errors that I get are handled over here. So this was what the front end application looks like. Let me just start the application. So we did get a response from the API. So that's working well. The next step is to actually deploy this application on AWS. And you can use various applications for it. You can use Vercel, you can use Netlify. I'm going to use S3 to deploy my application. So S3 is quite useful for deploying static applications. So for that, we'll first have to create a production build for our application. So that can be done through npm run build. So this is what I create a production build for our application. So you can just upload this entire folder to S3 and you will have your application running. So we are done with this part. The next part is to upload it on an S3 bucket. So we can just go to Amazon S3, create a bucket. Let's give it a new name, my GPT application. Enable public access and go ahead and create the bucket. So now we have to actually enable static web hosting that can be done through properties, enable static web hosting, and that is it. Yeah, and we also have to define the default pages it will be redirected to. So you can just do index.html. Now all we have to do is just upload all the build files that we created. So that go ahead and upload that. Upload. And we're done. So we have one more step remaining. We actually have to, okay, so all of your applications should be in the root folder. Just move them in that case. Actions, move. those. Okay. So now we have to we have to enable outside users to be able to access the resource. We'll have to enable them to basically read the files that we have on a server. So that can be enabled through creating a bucket policy. We can go ahead over here. So I have this policy saved. So what this basically does is enables outside users to have read access to all the objects in this bucket. So I can just enter my bucket name. Save changes. And we're done. So now if I go to properties, static web hosting, I should have my website set up. As you can see, it works as expected. Yeah. So yeah, there are a lot of applications and services that AWS provides, and like these are only a couple of them that we have used. And I also have one more project to show you, but I won't go into that much detail with it. I'll just give you a brief overview of how it works and the services that are used. So this is a smart photo album. It uses various services such as Amazon Recognition, which is for image detection, and it automatically detects the image and gets labels for it. For example, if you upload a photo of a dog, it'll generate labels for dog. And then it also has speech to text that is done through Amazon Transcribe. And then I've also used Amazon Lex for disambiguating the query data type over here. And another thing that I've used is AWS. It's called Elasticsearch. That they have actually renamed it to OpenSearch. So Elasticsearch is like a NoSQL database that is built on Java, and you can use it to search data, and it's widely used for analytics applications. So how the application works is I have several Lambda functions set up over here. So whenever I upload a file on this page, it first goes to a function called uploads photo. So over here, I get the entire thing. I convert it into base64. Then I insert it into S3 bucket. And once it's called my photo bucket 3. And once that gets inserted, I have a trigger that is set up on a Lambda function called lf1. So as you can see, I have an S3 trigger on it. It's a put trigger. So whenever something gets inserted into this bucket, this function automatically gets invoked. And what it does is it detects labels through Amazon Recognition, extract the labels from it, and also adds any custom labels that I have. So over here, once I upload a file, I can add custom labels. So if I upload a picture of a dog, I can just, enter pet or friend, So once these labels are extracted, these are actually inserted into the OpenSearch index as a JSON object. So the next part is actually extracting the images. So that is done through search over here. So let's just do tiger. So I got several images of tiger over here. So that also queries the OpenSearch index and uses the search parameters to look for the labels. And I'm using something called Amazon Lex, which is used for bot management. So I use it to disambiguate the query. So I'm just using placeholder text for now, but you can use custom inputs that you whatever custom inputs that you want for your bot. So you can store them in intents. I have an intent creator called search intents. And so I have a slot called keyword one. So that's going to extract whatever I enter over here in search. So from that, it looks into the directory and gives me the location of the file in that S3 bucket. And the last part is the voice feature. So that uses Amazon Transcribe to convert speech into text. So let me give you a quick demo of it. It does take some time to actually work. Tiger. So yeah, I did receive a response. Go ahead and search for it. We'll get all the images. So all this is controlled through various resources that I have set up on the API gateway. Go to photo search. I have various resources. So search is to actually search for something in the in the Elasticsearch database. Then I have upload to upload all the file, any images that I have that is directly connected to the upload photo function. And I also have voice, which is connected to the voice lambda function. So let's say I want to upload a new picture of a dog, let's say. Go ahead, add that image, provide any custom labels. So let's just say pet. Let's go ahead and search for dog. So as you can see, we got that image, and we can also search for pet. So yeah, as you can see, I already have some images over here on the server. We can also search for pictures. And you can see we got several pictures of dogs and tigers. So yeah, this was it. And there are a lot of possibilities with AWS. This is basically tip of the iceberg, I would say. And if you have any questions, do let me know in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer them.